Thanks for joining me on Careers and Finance podcast. Today, my guest is Robert Carson. And as with all my guests, I love to dig into their personal story, their career journey, and how they got to where they are and life they've built around that. And Rob's got a really interesting story to tell of a journey through financial advice into family enterprise advising and working with them. And so, Rob, I'd love to hand it over to you and just to tell us a bit of your story.
Dan, I've been advising families, high net worth families, for more than 20 years, more than 2 decades. And my career really started in finance way back when I first left school, actually. I first left school and got into banking. So banking was kind of the direction that I chose out of school, and a bit of a journey overseas at the same time sort of directed me back toward financial advice back in the late 90s, and started advising clients, private clients, just after September 11. So it was a beautiful time to be starting that kind of journey. It was like a baptism of fire.
You'd be amazed how many people have that like baptism of fire story, either something like September 11. I've had some other guys chat to me about they started right when kind of Bali bombing. And I've had other people start right during the GFC. And just, it's amazing how what you would often think is a good reason to run for the exit door has actually set up a lot of people's careers. How did that kind of work in your favor?
Look, it was probably a moment in time where you effectively have the training wheels on, and you got to see the very worst bits of the reaction to markets, the emotional impact that it has on private clients at that point in time. But at the same time, it's always darkest before dawn. So I was fortunate enough to kind of live through the early stages of my career, through the early on the bull run of the middle of the 2000s up through to September 11, and that was great. It's great from a career point of view to have that almost a safety net of great investment markets to be able to support the work that you're doing, and you are learning. Learning doesn't come from necessarily from the textbooks that you read, because everyone is different. Every private client is emotionally different, and the way they react to market movements is different. So if you have that kind of safety net, you learn to be able to talk with your clients, talk with your private clients that you're advising, and at the same time, applying some of the technical knowledge that you learn along the way.
Mm, mm. And Matt, it's interesting. You've already drawn out the idea of helping people with their emotions through all of the financial conversations. Clearly a big part of what you do, behavioral finance, understanding people. Where did you pick that up from? Because that was not a common idea maybe 20 years ago.
No. So it's actually fascinating to go back and look back on my career. You don't really realize it at the time, but if you think about how financial advice in Australia especially has progressed over the years, financial planning really only kicked off kind of the late 1990s in the common sense of it, so the current sense of it. That progressed, and the early stage of financial planning was parallel with what I was doing. Back then, it was early stage of Macquarie. It was your common stockbroking. Financial advice: here's some money, invest the money for me, make me a return. As financial planning progressed, it started to get a little bit more holistic, a little bit more in depth with different areas of financial advice. And at the same time, offshore in Europe and in the US, their financial markets and their financial advice framework had accelerated and gone further ahead of Australia than where we are. And I think that that's starting to catch up a little bit now, where we're looking beyond financial advice, beyond the holistic financial elements, and starting to look at the behavioral elements and the family impacts that go well beyond what is considered financial wealth into other areas of wealth, whether they talk about intellectual wealth or social capital, those sorts of areas which are becoming more and more important, especially right now as you're seeing a generational change in wealth. And that's where my role now as a family enterprise advisor comes from, is you start looking well beyond what is financial and looking into the well-being of families and how they approach the family's assets.
And how have you kind of grown through that process? Like you mentioned, you probably started early days people handing money. It's kind of get me on a platform or get me into a product and let's start investing. And now coming all the way through into that family enterprise space, which in terms of complexity, you've gone from 1 to a 9.5. How's your own journey of upskilling and working through all of the bits and pieces gone?
Yeah, look, it's funny because you talk about the technical skills that are involved in providing financial advice, and there's a far more education, formal education now required than what there used to be when I first started. The technical skills are what gets you in the room, gets you involved, but it's actually the emotional intelligence which keeps you there. You build some huge relationships, incredibly strong relationships with the families that you advise. I couldn't tell you the number of funerals I've been to. I've been to bar mitzvahs and I've been to weddings of the families that I have worked with over that time. It becomes that you are part of the family when you get to that stage. And that becomes really important. So as I have progressed and matured throughout my career, I've also noticed the impact that these sorts of this approach can have on a family and how important it is. I remember one story of a former client of mine who had unfortunately had a heart attack, and his wife called me from the back of the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Yeah, wow.
And of course, with a lot of relationships, it's a bit of a stereotype, but with a lot of financial advice relationships, you are often dealing with the male in the relationship, and that becomes a bit of a risk. And we've seen a lot of discussion about the potential for changes of financial advisors upon the passing of the main relationship within that main person within the relationship. So she called me and said, "Rob, I don't know what to do." I turned around to her and I said, "Why are you calling me? Don't worry, all the financial stuff's fine. You're sorted. Look after your husband."
Yeah.
And it was then that it kind of dawned on me that there is more to this world of financial advice or world of family advice than just the investments that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big one. When I was in financial advice, similar story. We had a guy, he was actually a triathlete and he was out riding his bike and he blacked out on his bike and just kind of crashed into the grass. And it was this big wake up moment, fully fit, fully healthy, genuine triathlete suddenly has this big moment. And it was like, whoa, are my affairs really in order? Like, Dan, have you done a good
Yeah,
job? And
yeah,
and
entirely.
fortunately, we held up to the test on that one, which was really good. And he made it through um, at the time. But just one of those moments that you remember. It's like the rubber's really hit the road here. And, you know, has the advice we given going to stand up to this little crisis moment? And so, mate, if we switch gears a little bit, I would love to kind of hear about the mindset piece. I know the mindset in investing is so important, and so when someone comes to you and they've got, complexity and significant family wealth, one of these kind of ultra high net worth families, what's the mindset work you do with them?
Yeah, on face value, ultra high net worth families and a private client, retail private client, there's no real difference. There shouldn't be a real difference. It's just a number of zeros up on their balance sheet. But in actual fact, um, the ultra high net worth, especially ones who have just come into money, it does require a mindset shift. It's like you talk about a bank teller. I used to be a bank teller when I first started my first career, and we would hold a cash float in our station at the bank teller, and the cash float would be about $100,000, and it was just paper money. To get that, it was just paper. Sorry. So to get that mindset shift of saying, well, look, it's just a zero on my balance sheet, rather than it's $1 million or $5 million or $10 million. That requires an understanding that you're facing now a different kind of discipline. you're now facing something that is a lot more important than providing for yourself and your family for today. You're actually providing for something else tomorrow, and you start looking beyond what is the immediate need to perhaps even having an opportunity to form a significant legacy. So you talk to people about that and say, well, look, yes, it hasn't changed. Life hasn't changed because you have extra zeros on your name, but you do have an opportunity to make a change, and the extra zeros are the tool to help you make that change.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not the finish line, right? The balance sheet's not the finish line, and the balance sheet's only the start.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that comment. I mean, it's almost shifting people from, I mean, survival sounds wrong, but a survival kind of mindset of money in, money out into a legacy mindset of kind of, where are we going for the future here? What is it I want to leave to my children and their children, but also what is going to be my impact on the community and the world around me? Yeah. And so going hand in hand with that, I suppose, of changing and shifting mindsets, talk to me about like common mistakes you see when people have either set things up or they've come to you for help, and what are some of the things they can do to avoid them?
So the biggest mistake I've seen are people who want to get bigger. So they're big, they've now come into money, and they want to get bigger. So they start taking additional risk. I mean, if you think about the old saying, you make money through concentrations of risk, but you keep money through diversification of risk. It's a very simple concept. They feel that concentration of risk is the only way to go. There's an element of entering this brand new world of family enterprise for themselves. Their family becomes a complex beast. Suddenly you've got money, so I need to set up a self-managed super fund. I need to set up a family trust. I need to set up a bucket company. Maybe I'll have a second family trust for another reason. And they create complexity, and it feels clever for these families. Complexity does feel clever, but often it can hide some fragility. Okay, so often, being complex can hide the fact that if you made it simpler, life could actually be easier. And the final thing I would say about common mistakes is that far too many people want to go and delegate understanding. So they kind of stop and say, all right, I need a wealth manager to go and manage all my money. And I'm just going to give it to them and they can do what they want. And which is admirable and very trusting, but you can outsource execution, but at the end of the day, you can't outsource comprehension. You can't outsource the understanding of what you're actually doing. Because if you outsource that in its entirety, then you're often missing the picture of what is actually happening over there when there's something over here that you do understand and they don't match.
Yeah.
So, first common mistake, getting too complex too quickly. Second common mistake, outsourcing something to someone without a full understanding of what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I learned that when I left financial advice, that one. And I sat down, I did all my handover meetings with the new advisor who was taking over my clients. And one of the questions we asked was like, what do you wish Dan had done differently? And fortunately, most of them, it was nothing major, but I will never forget one of the conversations I had, was one of my larger clients and a retiree. And he said, I just wish he would have sent me a text or given me a call on the days the market tanked. And I was kind of like, yeah, but you outsource that to me. You generally don't want to know anything. And he was like, I know, but when I sit down at 6 o'clock and watch the news and they tell me it's a bloodbath out there, it stresses me out still. And I know you do a good job. We had done well for him. We had never mishandled anything. His money was safe and well, allocated. But on those days when you watch bloodbath and this problem and that problem, he was like, I would have loved a message just to know my money was fine.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
It's like having it's like being a test cricketer, right? Having a run of ducks, knowing that you're going to be dropped from the test team, but not finding out until the media comes out, right?
That's it. And they just come and tell you things their own way.
Correct.
Yep. And so, mate, on that note, of having understanding and delegating understanding, what is the right way? Like, I know you work with lawyers and estate planners and accountants, and there's a well-oiled team that you try and build in these family groups and enterprises. How does that kind of work in, I guess, practice and behind the scenes? How do you help get the right understanding in the room at the right time? And what's your role in all of that?
Sure. So one of the biggest complaints I've heard from families since I started doing what I'm doing now is that they have attempted to have family meetings with their professional advisors. And you get their wealth managers in the room or their financial planners in the room, you get their accountants in the room, you get their lawyers in the room, and they're fantastic. They trust them and they do a great job. But once you bring them all together to have a family meeting, each of those professional advisors feels like they should be leading the conversation. Each of those professional advisors, they compete for influence, and that's not the right way about it. There needs to be some collaboration. You call it collaboration for continuity. The idea is having these advisors all working cap in hand to get the right outcome for the family. My role in that is to try and coordinate that. So because I'm not a financial advisor any longer,
Yep.
because I'm not a lawyer, never have been, because I'm not an accountant, I'll leave that to the accountants. I come in as a family representative. So my role there is to actually lead that conversation, ask the right questions of those professional advisors to enable the family to understand what they are doing and how they are all working together. And if they're not working together, my role there is to bring them on the same page. The great part about that is that the advisors can then just go and leave their ego at the door. At the end of the day, if they can do that, that allows the priority to remain the family and not the advisor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they're there for, right? And whether it happens consciously or subconsciously, it does happen, unfortunately. So, the families then get the combined wisdom of the professional advisors in the room rather than the individual wisdom of them separately.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is hard, to get smart people who have in the room probably one of their highly valued clients, and to all sit there and work towards a common goal when often they're used to just running the show.
Correct.
So it's a tricky thing, and I can see how much value that can potentially add to the client and to that industry. Switching up a little bit, if you had a client come and see you, and maybe they've just gone through either a liquidity event, like maybe they've sold their business, and for the first time in 20, 30 years, they've gone from worrying about, all the bits and pieces, the day-to-day of running that business, and now they've received a substantial check from someone. What's the first, few steps you go through and go, these are the really, really big things we need to look at on day one, and kind of what is that first piece of advice you walk them through?
Why? It's the first question that's asked. Why is it that they are going to do what they want to do? The wealth itself is a great tool to get something done. It's not, like I said earlier, it's not the finish line. So it's an enabler. Often we'd say, don't start with the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet's kind of the last piece of the puzzle. You start with the story that you actually want the wealth to tell. So are you going to use this tool to help your children buy a house? Okay, that's a common one these days. Are you going to use this tool to help society through charitable contributions? Are you going to use this tool to enhance your own lifestyle? Why are you going to do that? The investor or the family can articulate the why. It enables you to backtrack and then understand the how.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very simple thought process. But when you're a financial advisor and someone comes to you and goes, I've got $5 million I want to invest and I want you to make me 15% per annum with no risk. The first question the advisor should be asking is why? Not let me show you my approved product list and my suite of core satellite solutions and my separately managed accounts, and I'll make them all bespoke for you because you're a good client. But I'll use the standard product.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
why. Why are you here seeing me as an advisor?
Yeah.
Why did you come up with the decision to come and see me and not so and so next door?
Mm. And how do you help to draw that out of people? Because I found when I was an advisor, some of these why conversations sort of hit a bit of a wall where people really struggled to articulate why they wanted something. So when they come in and they'd say, I want, I've got X amount and I want to target X kind of return. And you would sit there and go, well, why? They would kind of look at you like, because that's your job. And I'm like, so how do you help people actually, break it down into a meaningful why?
So that's my job because I don't have I want to say ulterior motive, but because I don't have the other part of the puzzle, which is I don't provide the financial advice. The families that I act for ask me, they expect me to ask them the why. Whereas if they're going to meet a wealth manager for the first time, they're expecting them to be told what to invest in. So if they don't have the relationship, they don't have the rapport with the family or the investor, it's very difficult for the investor to get past that roadblock of being asked why.
Yeah. Yeah. And out of interest, how long do you spend getting to know a client?
As long as it takes. Yeah, as long as it takes. The reality is you never stop learning about a client. I mean, I've been married for coming up 20 years. There are still things about my wife that I didn't know about her as a child, or I think I found out just yesterday that she was a prefect at school. I had no idea. So, it's the same with any family you're acting for. There are always things that surprise you, always things that you didn't know about. They just come up in conversation. You form a relationship. Like I was saying earlier, you go to their weddings and you understand the person that they are. As an advisor, you want to deal with people who you like, who are genuinely like you as well. So you have that common interest along the way.
Yep.
As long as it takes.
Yep. And mate, if you were to meet an upcoming advisor, someone who's maybe 3 years in the industry, they've finished their professional year and have just started advising clients, what are the skills? What are the key skills? What are the attributes they have to master if they want to have a great career in financial advice?
So first thing I'd say is the technical skills go without saying. The basic technical skills of financial advice go without saying. Understand all aspects of financial advice, not just your niche. So if that's investment, that's your niche. If it's insurance, that's your niche. I touched on it earlier. The technical skills will get you in the room, but it's the emotional intelligence that keeps you there.
Yeah.
That's probably the first thing. The second thing is that I feel tomorrow's advisor will need to be part translator, part strategist, and part therapist as well. Because there is more to just this world of financial wealth that is going to be more and more important to our families, to our clients, to the Australian public. They need to understand deeper than what is in the bank account.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me a little bit more on that second one there. The part, what did you say? Part translator, part counselor, part
Strategist.
strategist. What are you referencing there?
So behavioral finance.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a therapy part of it, but the behavioral finance goes beyond that. So if you think about how a family operates together, so family dynamics, I speak to families now who have conflicts between siblings that are derived, when you start digging deeper, they're derived from a he said, she said argument when they were 7 years old that they still hold a grudge over. Okay, so getting past those sorts of issues when it comes to the transition of family wealth, if you can get past some of those issues, then in all reality, when the transition of wealth occurs, there's going to be less conflict or less issues to occur, and hopefully less involvement from the legal fraternity in that.
Yeah.
But that often is part of the discussion between siblings when it comes to estates. The problems that occur are occurring many, many years before you get involved.
Yeah.
So you have to have that ability to speak to the families and to dig a little bit deeper, have those relationships that allows them the safe space to talk about what it is what it is that has created the conflict along the way.
Yeah.
From a strategy point of view, strategy incorporates not just investment strategy, but then incorporates the intergenerational wealth strategy. That's where your lawyers and accountants are really, really important. It talks about how you want to set up your legacy for a long period of time. That's the strategy behind it. And I think translator goes with that saying.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I think that the pace that's shining through in this conversation that I really hope whoever listens to it, whatever advisors get a hold of this, is the way that you're really willing to have difficult conversations. You're really willing to press in rather than patch over the top. I think it's really tempting as an advisor to patch over the top and pretend everything's okay and that the family's going to be fine and not going to blow up. We'll just keep moving the puzzle pieces and hope it all works.
Yep.
But it's really coming through that willingness to, I guess, even like hold their hand through really difficult conversations about what makes you a family and why things are the way they are. Because I love the analogy that money is a giant amplifier.
Yep.
So if there's a problem from 7 years old where you said that thing to me and that has always hurt me, you throw money in the mix and that hurt just becomes a giant amplifier, and so I can really see how the willingness to have those difficult conversations, the EQ as well to have those has endeared you to clients, and put you in that really trusted position.
100%.
Mate, Rob, thanks so much for your time today. That has been a ripping conversation and great insights to the world of enterprise wealth, family management, family solutions, and a whole world of ultra high net worth advice. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been a great privilege.
Absolute pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me.